In March 2020, Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings watched $4.7 billion in market value evaporate in a single month. Their ships sat empty in ports around the world, burning through $500 million in cash every single month they were not moving. Just to survive, they took on so much debt that they are still paying it off today. Most people think owning a cruise ship is a dream business. You sell a few thousand tickets, guests spend money on board, the ship practically runs itself, right? But here's what nobody tells you before they sell you the dream. A single luxury cruise ship costs over $1 billion to build. It burns tens of thousands of gallons of fuel every single day at sea. And the moment it stops sailing, for a storm, a pandemic, a broken engine, you keep bleeding money whether or not a single passenger is on board. Today, we run the actual numbers on what it costs to own, operate, and profit from a luxury cruise ship, and the math is going to surprise you. Let us start with what you're actually buying. A modern luxury cruise ship, something like Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas, costs approximately $1.35 billion to build from scratch. That is not a typo. $1.35 billion for context. That is more than the GDP of several small countries. The shipyard takes 5 to 6 years to construct one. The steel alone weighs over 200,000 metric tons. And when it is done, you have got a floating city. Restaurants, pools, theaters, a casino, medical facilities, water parks, all of it crammed onto a vessel the length of 3.5 football fields. Now, most cruise lines do not pay for this upfront in cash. They finance it. On a $1.35 billion ship, you're looking at roughly $80 to $100 million in annual debt service, interest, and principal payments every year for the next 20 to 25 years. That is before a single passenger steps on board. Here's where it gets brutal. Once the ship is sailing, you're burning money around the clock. Literally, fuel is the single largest operating expense on any cruise ship. A large modern vessel consumes somewhere between 150 and 400 metric tons of fuel per day at sea. At current heavy fuel oil prices, that is anywhere from $150,000 to $400,000 per day, just in fuel, every day, including the days when you're running at reduced speed, repositioning between seasons, or idling in a port. On an annual basis, fuel alone can run $55 million to over $146 million for a single ship. Then you have crew. A large cruise ship carries anywhere from 2,000 to 2,500 crew members. After wages, room, board, training, healthcare, and repatriation costs, because your crew comes from all over the world, you're spending roughly $150 to $200 million per year just on the people keeping that ship running. After that, you have got port fees every time the ship docks, and on a 7-day Caribbean cruise, it might dock 4 or 5 times. You pay the port authority. Those fees range from $50,000 to $300,000 per port visit, depending on the location and the size of the ship. Run the math on a full year of cruising, with over 50 port calls, and you're looking at another $10 to $30 million in port fees alone. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because the costs most people think about are actually the surface level stuff. The costs nobody talks about are what make or break the economics. Every cruise ship must go through what is called dry dock, mandatory maintenance periods, where the ship is pulled completely out of service, inspected by regulators, and refurbished. This happens every 2.5 years for a major dry dock and annually for smaller maintenance periods. A major dry dock costs between $30 and $75 million each time, and during that period, which lasts 4 to 8 weeks, the ship generates zero revenue while still carrying debt payments. Then there's insurance. Insuring a $1.35 billion asset at sea against weather events, hull damage, passenger liability, and environmental damage costs somewhere between $20 and $40 million per year in premiums. Add environmental compliance. The International Maritime Organization has strict emission standards. Ships are switching to liquefied natural gas, installing scrubber systems, and purchasing emissions allowances under expanding carbon markets. Compliance adds another $10 to $30 million per year to operating costs. And food, a large ship feeding 6,000 passengers and 2,200 crew, 3 meals a day plus snacks, room service, and specialty dining. That is roughly $20 to $40 million per year in food and beverage supplies alone. When you add it all up, debt service, fuel, crew, ports, dry dock amortized annually, insurance, food, environmental compliance, and administration, you're spending somewhere between $650 million and $900 million per year to run a single large luxury cruise ship. So how on earth does this business survive? Because it does more than survive. Royal Caribbean posted $13.9 billion in revenue in 2024. Carnival Corporation, which owns 9 cruise brands globally, generated $25 billion. The secret is that the ticket price is almost never where the real money comes from. On a 7-night Caribbean cruise, the average passenger pays roughly $1,200 to $2,500 for their cabin. Across 5,000 paying passengers, that is $6 to $12.5 million in ticket revenue per voyage. Multiply by roughly 48 voyages per year, and you're looking at $288 million to $600 million in ticket revenue annually. That sounds like a lot, until you remember you're spending $650 to $900 million to run the ship. This is why the entire business model was engineered around onboard revenue. Once a passenger is on the ship, they are in a sealed environment with no competition. Drinks, specialty restaurants, spa treatments, casino games, shore excursions booked through the cruise line, internet packages, photography packages, every single one of these is a high-margin add-on sale. The average cruise passenger spends an additional $50 to $150 per person per day on board beyond their ticket price. On a 7-night cruise, that is another $350 to $1,050 per passenger. Multiply that across 5,000 passengers and 48 voyages, and onboard spending adds another $84 million to $252 million in annual revenue. Then there is the casino, one of the highest margin operations on any ship. A large ship's casino can generate $2 to $5 million per voyage. Annually, that alone adds $96 to $240 million in pure high-margin revenue. Shore excursions are another massive profit center. The cruise line books excursions through local operators at wholesale rates and resells them to passengers at a 40 to 60% markup. On a ship with 5,000 passengers, where 60% book at least one excursion, that adds another $15 to $40 million per year per ship. Add it all together: tickets, onboard spending, casino excursions, beverage packages, internet, spa, and a well-run luxury ship on a popular route generates between $750 million and $1.1 billion in annual revenue. Now you see the game. Revenue, $750 million to $1.1 billion. Operating costs, $650 million to $900 million. Net operating income before taxes and corporate overhead, roughly $50 million to $200 million per year on a single ship. That sounds like a profit. And it is, if the ship sails at roughly 85 to 95% occupancy. That number is called the load factor, and it is the single most important metric in the cruise business. Because here is what cruise executives know that aspiring owners do not. Your costs barely change whether the ship is 50% full or 100% full. Fuel, crew, debt, port fees, insurance, they are all fixed or nearly fixed. When occupancy drops, revenue craters, but costs do not. In the first quarter of 2020, as COVID-19 shut down global travel, cruise ships had a load factor of essentially zero. Ships sat anchored, costs kept running. Norwegian Cruise Line burned through $160 million every single month just maintaining ships that were not moving. Carnival lost $10.2 billion in 2020 alone. Royal Caribbean lost $5.8 billion. The industry survived only by raising $30 billion in emergency debt across the major lines, debt that took years to pay down and permanently increased their cost structure. The cruise business is one of the most capital-intensive, operationally fragile businesses on Earth. It is extraordinary when it works, and catastrophic when it does not. Let us talk about the math that nobody puts in the investor deck. First, depreciation. A cruise ship has a useful economic life of roughly 25 to 30 years. After that, it is either sold to a budget line, used as a hotel ship, or scrapped. A $1.35 billion ship depreciating over 30 years is roughly $45 million per year in depreciation, a real cost to the business, even though no cash changes hands. Second, weather and geopolitical risk. The Caribbean hurricane season runs June through November. Ships on Caribbean routes have to reposition, often to Alaska or Europe, during peak hurricane months. That repositioning costs money and often comes with lower ticket prices, because the routes are less popular. Third, the environmental wall is closing in. The International Maritime Organization's net zero shipping target hits in 2050, converting a ship's propulsion to low-carbon alternatives. LNG, methanol, hydrogen costs hundreds of millions per vessel. Lines that do not upgrade will face carbon taxes and port access restrictions that make routes economically unviable. This is not future speculation. It is a cost that ships built today will have to absorb before they are even paid off. Fourth, you cannot own just one. The economics of scale in the cruise industry mean a single ship operator can almost never survive. You need a brand, a fleet, a reservation system, a global marketing budget. The major cruise lines operate 20, 30, even over 100 ships. That scale spreads the overhead, the IT systems, the marketing spend, the port relationships, the corporate staff, across a much larger revenue base. If you buy one ship and try to compete with Carnival and Royal Caribbean as a standalone operator, you will lose. Your cost of acquiring passengers will be 3 to 5 times higher per booking. Your port relationships will be weaker. Your onboard revenue system will not have the data and loyalty programs that the big lines have spent decades optimizing. So who actually wins in the cruise business? The ultra-luxury niche is quietly printing money. Lines like Silver Sea, Seabourn, and Regent Seven Seas carry 500 to 700 passengers on ships, purpose-built for intimacy. These ships cost $400 to $600 million, far less than a mega ship. But because they serve high net worth travelers, ticket prices run $800 to $1,500 per person per night. Some expedition voyages go to $2,000 per person per night. Onboard spending per passenger is also dramatically higher. The margin structure in ultra-luxury is fundamentally different. You're not dependent on volume. You're not fighting to fill 6,000 berths every week. You build a waitlist of loyal repeat guests and print margins of 30 to 40%. Expedition cruising is another booming segment. Antarctica, the Arctic, the Galapagos, small ships, extreme destinations, passengers who are adventure travelers and scientists and photographers with deep pockets. The market for expedition cruising has grown over 40% since 2019, and there is still no dominant player. And then there is the quiet play almost no one talks about: port terminal ownership. The cruise lines have started buying their own port infrastructure, private island destinations like Perfect Day at Coco Cay, owned by Royal Caribbean, and Celebration Key, owned by Carnival. Passengers spend money at the destination, and the cruise line captures 100% of it instead of splitting it with an independent port operator. Perfect Day at Coco Cay reportedly generates over $200 million a year from a $150 million infrastructure investment. That is extraordinary economics for an asset class that normally struggles to hit 15% margins. Here is the honest verdict after running all the numbers. Owning a megaship cruise line is one of the most capital-destructive businesses you can enter. The barriers to entry are measured in the billions. The fixed costs are brutal. The downside scenarios, pandemic, fuel price spike, environmental regulation, are existential. 3 times in the last 25 years, something nearly wiped out the entire industry. But the upside? When it works, and right now it is working, the established cruise lines are generating returns that rival any business in the world. Royal Caribbean's EBITDA margin in 2024 was over 30%, on $14 billion in revenue. That is a $4 billion annual cash flow machine. The window of opportunity is not in mega ships, it is in the niches that the giants have not fully colonized: ultra-luxury, expedition, river cruising, themed voyages, private island development. These are the spaces where a well-capitalized entrepreneur with genuine hospitality expertise can build something extraordinary. Because the cruise industry just hit its highest revenue year in recorded history, demand is not going away. The question is whether you can find the angle where the math actually works in your favor, or whether you get swept up in the romance of a billion-dollar floating hotel without understanding what is underneath the waterline. That is the full economics of owning a luxury cruise ship. Not the brochure version, the real version. If you have made it this far, you already think differently about business than 99% of people watching. Drop in the comments, would you rather own the megaship or the ultra-luxury boutique? I genuinely want to know, like this video, if the math surprised you. Subscribe if you want to keep running numbers on businesses that most people only dream about. The next one, you will not see it come.